I recently sat through a presentation by a cultural analyst who was waxing poetic about the grace of Japanese social change. He spent a good 10 minutes talking about the concept of gammon, that stoic, silent endurance the world so often associates with Japan. He pointed to the #Kutu movement as his crowning example, describing it as a soft whisper and a gentle adjustment to the status quo. He painted a picture of women quietly choosing comfort over pain, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that didn't need to shout to be heard. To him, it was a beautiful, uniquely Japanese rejection of Western-style confrontation. It was a lovely narrative. It was also completely wrong. While he was busy romanticizing the silence of the movement, the actual reality was playing out in a much louder, more bruising arena. I started looking into the woman who started it all, Yumi Ishikawa. She wasn't whispering. She was at the center of a digital firestorm, facing flaming attacks and vicious online harassment for daring to suggest that corporate dress codes were a form of structural violence. The turning point for me was watching the footage from a parliamentary committee meeting. There was nothing soft about it. When the then health minister, Takumi Nemoto, stood up and flatly dismissed a petition signed by over 18,000 people, stating that high heels were socially accepted as necessary and appropriate, the mask of Japanese harmony completely shattered. It wasn't a quiet internal loosening. It was a direct, head-on collision between a new generation of feminist activists and a rigid conservative establishment. We often like to exoticize movements in other cultures, framing them as mystical shifts in sensation, rather than hard-fought battles for labor rights. But when you look at the medical reality of orthopedic damage and the political reality of a government minister digging in his heels, you realize #Kutu wasn't an aesthetic choice. It was an active war against a culture that demands women suffer in silence. The question isn't why the Japanese whisper changed the room. The question is why we are so determined to ignore the roar that actually did the work.
Wow. Yeah. That introduction really just cuts right to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
Too. Because that presentation I sat through, it was frustrating. It was this beautiful, clean narrative that completely erased the actual fight.
It's a common trap. I mean, we do this all the time with Japan. We apply this like Zen garden filter to everything. We assume that even their protests have to be these serene, meditative acts.
Like an Ikebana arrangement of dissent.
Exactly. But when you strip away that exoticism, when you actually get your hands dirty and look at the documentation, you mentioned the parliamentary minutes, the medical records, the online harassment logs, this isn't a cultural story.
No.
It is a brutal, modern labor dispute.
And that is precisely the mission for us in this deep dive. We are going to aggressively, strip away that filter. We are not here to talk about harmony or Eastern aesthetics or the grace of social change.
No whispers.
No whispers. We are treating the #Kutu movement as a raw case study, a case study in labor rights and 21st century gender equality. We have to analyze it with the same rigor, the same clinical detachment we would apply to a miners' strike or a walkout at a tech giant.
And to do that properly, you have to look at the machinery of the opposition. You have to understand what they were up against. We've pulled together a stack of sources that are, well, they're frankly pretty heavy.
This isn't just about reading a few viral tweets.
Oh, we're digging into academic journals on resistance theory. Specifically, I was fascinated by the papers on constructive resistance and how that operates in these highly authoritarian corporate structures that are common in East Asia.
And the parliamentary records. The transcripts from the Diet.
Oh, the transcripts are infuriating. They are so revealing in what is said, but also in what isn't said. The language is so carefully chosen to shut down the conversation.
The economic data on what these dress codes actually cost, the productivity loss, the medical bills, it's a number on a balance sheet.
Right. So we're looking at this from three angles, really. The bureaucratic wall they ran into, the economic reality of the pain, and the digital rebellion that started it all.
So let's start with the system itself. I think to really understand why #Kutu exploded, you have to understand the pressure cooker these women were living and working in. I've been diving deep into the digital archives of East Asian labor movements lately, and one thing that strikes me as a creator is how often we mistake silence for consent. It's this pervasive thing.
Absolutely.
We tend to look at Japanese corporate culture through this lens of shikaragane.
That can't be helped.
The idea that some things are just. They're immutable facts of life, and you just have to endure them. But when you look at the #Kutu movement, you see the cracks in that facade. You realize it's not that it couldn't be helped, it's that no one had found the right tool to help it yet.
It's the difference between a genuine, resigned silence and a silence that has been actively imposed. It's the difference between silence and silencing.
Exactly, and to make that real, I pieced together these three perspectives. I found that I think they really humanize the cold bureaucratic logic of these labor structures.
Yeah.
I read about a woman, let's call her Hana.
Okay.
She worked at a high-end reception desk in Tokyo, a really prestigious company. And for years, she followed the employee manual to the letter, a 7-centimeter heel, every single day, without exception.
7 centimeters, that's almost 3 inches.
Yeah, and I want you to just try to imagine the sheer physical toll. You're not sitting, you're standing for 8 hours on a literal incline. Your entire body weight is being forced onto the balls of your feet.
It's biomechanically unnatural. It's a torture device if you really think about it.
And in her world, this pain wasn't seen as a problem to be solved. It was framed as a professional tax.
A professional tax. Wow, that phrase is so sticky. It's so revealing. It implies that pain is the currency you pay just for the privilege of having the job. It's the price of admission to a professional space. You pay it just to have a seat at the table, or in her case, to stand near it.
And for her, the breaking point was when she saw the official government response. She saw the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare dismiss the #Kutu petition, labeling her daily agony as necessary and appropriate. And for her, it just felt like a door slamming shut in her face.
A validation of the pain. The government was saying, yes, your tax is correct. Keep paying it.
I saw her story reflected in a blog post she wrote where she described the silent office. It was this haunting image, a place where the only sound allowed was the constant sharp clicking of heels on the marble floor.
Masking the other sounds.
Masking the groans, the sighs, the throbbing in 1,000 pairs of feet. It wasn't just about shoes anymore for her. It was this dawning realization that the bureaucracy, the state itself, viewed her physical suffering as a baseline requirement for a polite society.
The cost of doing business politely?
Yeah. And reading about this, I feel this sense of profound frustration. As someone who analyzes these trends, it's jarring. It's just so jarring to see a government body prioritize these vague social norms over the literal skeletal health of its citizens.
It's a complete abdication of responsibility. The Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. Health and labor are right there in the name.
It's a reminder that petitioning a system that fundamentally benefits from your compliance is often, an uphill battle in heels.
And this is where we have to bring in Yumi Ishikawa, because for so long, everyone like Hana was paying this tax individually, in silence.
Right, in their own little bubble of pain.
And it took one person to finally look at the receipt and say, hang on, wait a minute, why am I paying this? What is this line item?
And looking at Ishikawa's background, she's such a fascinating figure to lead a labor movement. Because she isn't a union organizer, she's not a politician or a lawyer. No, she's a writer, an actress. And at the time this all kicked off, she was working part-time at a funeral parlor.
A funeral parlor. I mean, talk about a setting where decorum is weaponized.
It's the ultimate rigid environment, isn't it? There is zero room for error. You cannot be out of place in a funeral home. The solemnity is everything.
It's January 2019. She's working this job, spending hours on her feet, standing during services, guiding grieving guests. She looks down at her feet, which are, just screaming in pain. And then she looks over at her male colleagues,
who are, I'm assuming, wearing comfortable flat leather shoes, probably with some actual arch support.
Exactly. They're insensible Oxfords. They're comfortable. They can focus on their job, which is comforting people. She, meanwhile, is mandated by her employer to wear heels that are specifically between 5 to 7 centimeters.
And I want to pause on that number because you did earlier, 5 to 7 centimeters. It doesn't sound like a lot if you just, visualize a ruler.
No, it sounds manageable.
But biomechanically, from an orthopedic standpoint, it's massive.
At 7 centimeters, you are putting the foot in a state of severe plantar flexion. You are effectively walking on the heads of your metatarsals. That's the ball of your foot for 8 hours straight.
And it throws everything else off.
It shifts your entire center of gravity forward. Your lower back has to arch unnaturally to compensate. Your knees are under constant strain. Your Achilles tendon starts to shorten. It's a cascade of musculoskeletal damage.
So she's standing there, back aching, feet throbbing, watching the man walk around comfortably, doing the exact same job. And she does what so many of us do. She goes to social media to vent.
Yeah, it wasn't a manifesto. It wasn't some grand call to arms. It was just a tweet, a moment of frustration.
Something like, why do I have to suffer this pain when the men doing the same job don't?
And the internet did what the internet does. It exploded. It was like she'd struck a nerve that no one even knew was exposed.
How fast did it take off?
We're talking over 30,000 retweets in a very short period. And this is where that silent office you mentioned suddenly got very, very loud.
It's because it wasn't just Me Too. It was Me Too, and here's the evidence.
Women started replying not just with words, but with images. Photos of their feet after a workday, photos of blisters the size of coins, photos of blood-soaked socks and tights, stories of bunions so bad they required corrective surgery. It became this massive shared visual testament to the pain.
It's like the dam just broke. All that silent individual suffering suddenly found a voice in a community.
Yeah. And Ishikawa sees this incredible energy, this outpouring, and she realizes, okay, this isn't just my problem at the funeral home. This is a national, maybe even global problem.
So she decides to formalize it, to channel that energy.
She launches a change.org petition.
Which in the Japanese context is a significant move. It's not the traditional way of doing things.
So online petitions are gaining ground, but they are still seen as a bit of an outsider tactic. The proper way is through quiet, behind-the-scenes lobbying. This was very public.
And the signatures just poured in.
She gathers 18,856 signatures very, very quickly. That number eventually surpasses 30,000, and she doesn't just, email it. She prints it out. She takes this physical stack of paper representing thousands of real people and submits it directly to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, the MHLW.
Okay, so this is the moment of truth.
Yeah.
This is where we get to analyze the efficacy of this kind of direct petitioning versus the immovable object of the bureaucratic machine.
Right.
In a logical world, in a world where health and labor mean something, you'd expect the ministry to say, oh my goodness, 18,000 people are reporting workplace injuries. We need to investigate this immediately. Worker safety is paramount.
You would absolutely think that would be the response. But this is where the movement hits what I call the bureaucratic wall.
And it hits it hard.
It hits it at full speed. Yeah. This leads us to that now infamous Diet Committee meeting on June 5th, 2019. I have the transcript of this meeting in front of me, and the tone, the language, it is just.
Yeah.
It's chillingly polite and utterly dismissive.
What did that room look like?
Okay. So you're in the lower house committee on health, labor, and welfare. It's a formal wood-paneled room. On one side, you have Otsuji Kanako. She's a member of the opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party.
And she's a notable figure in her own right.
So she's openly gay, which is still rare in Japanese politics. She's a massive advocate for LGBTQ rights and women's rights. She's the challenger. She's there to fight. Right. On the other side, you have Takumi Nomoto. He's the health minister at the time, a member of the ruling LDP party, a quintessential establishment figure. He's the gatekeeper.
So Otsuji brings up the petition.
She confronts him directly. She holds him to account. She reads out parts of it and asks essentially a very simple question. Is it okay for employers to force women to wear high heels that cause physical injury?
It's a yes or no question. It's a moral question. Is it okay to hurt your workers for the sake of appearances?
But Nomoto doesn't say yes or no. He dodges. He uses a very specific, very powerful Japanese phrase. He says, shakai tsunen.
Which translates to something like socially accepted ideas or societal consensus.
Right. It's a vague but incredibly potent concept. He says that wearing high heels is socially accepted as necessary and appropriate in the workplace.
Wait, let me just make sure I understand the logic here. The health minister, the man whose entire job is to protect the physical well-being of the nation's workforce, is saying that a social idea is more important than physical health.
That is explicitly his argument. He is saying that because society, or at least the corporate world, expects women to look a certain way in a professional setting, that expectation constitutes a necessity. Therefore, the employer is justified in demanding it, even if it causes pain, even if it causes long-term injury.
That is one of the most incredible things I've ever heard. That's effectively saying that the aesthetic pleasure of the customer or the boss or just some abstract idea of professionalism is more valuable than the skeletal integrity of the employee.
That's precisely what he's saying. The visual is more important than the physical. Now, he did offer a tiny, almost insulting concession.
Oh, this I have to hear.
He said that if a worker was already injured, say you came to work with a broken foot or a doctor's note for a severe medical condition, then forcing them to wear heels might constitute power harassment under Japanese law.
So you have to be broken first. The system has to have already broken you for you to get an exemption from the thing that's breaking you.
You have to be medically compromised to get an exemption. If you are healthy, your pain is just the price of admission. The logic is that unless you have a pre-existing condition, the mandate is within the employer's rights because it fits the atmosphere of business.
Atmosphere. We hear that word so much in any analysis of Japanese society. Read the air. Don't spoil the atmosphere.
Exactly. The atmosphere of the office apparently requires the rhythmic click-clack of heels on the floor, regardless of the cost.
It sounds like a massive gap in legal protection. I mean, surely there's a law for this. What about Japan's Equal Employment Opportunity Law, the EEOL? I thought that was passed decades ago to fix this kind of gender discrimination.
The EEOL, passed in 1986. On paper, it's the holy grail of Japanese gender equality legislation. In practice, it's a tiger with no teeth. It's been declawed. The law prohibits discrimination based on gender, yes, but it lacks strong, meaningful enforcement mechanisms.
So what happens if a company breaks the law?
There are no massive punitive damages like you'd see in a U.S. lawsuit. There's no real financial bite. If a company is found to be in violation of the EEOL, the government issues what's called administrative guidance. The Japanese term is gyusei shido.
Is it a fine?
Really, it's basically a stonily worded letter, a public slap on the wrist. The ministry says, please don't do that again. It's not in the spirit of the law.
So it's a shaming mechanism.
But companies can and do essentially ignore it if they calculate that the cost of changing their policies is higher than the public shame of the warning.
And this connects to a broader concept I've read about, this idea of state feminism in Japan.
Yes, that's a key piece of the puzzle. You have these government bureaus, like the Gender Equality Bureau, that look great on an organizational chart. They produce glossy white papers, they hold seminars, they have websites.
They check the boxes.
They check all the boxes of a modern progressive state. But they lack hard power. They lack the legal authority to actually challenge the real power brokers, especially the Kaidenren.
The Japan Business Federation, the big one.
The most powerful economic lobby in the entire country, the voice of big business. And the Kaidenren wants deregulation. They want maximum flexibility for employers. They absolutely do not want the government coming in and micromanaging something as trivial as a dress code.
So you have a stalemate. The activists and the toothless government bureaus on one side and the powerful business lobby on the other.
A complete stalemate. And right in the middle of this, you have the government's flagship policy of womenomics.
Gospel. Prime Minister Abe spent years pushing womenomics.
It was his signature policy. The idea that Japan's shrinking economy could only be saved by bringing more women into the workforce. Let women shine, that was the slogan.
Let women shine, but make sure they do it in shoes that systematically cripple them.
It's a complete and total contradiction. You have the prime minister on one hand begging women to join or return to the workforce because of the severe labor shortage. And then you have his own health minister on the other hand telling them they must adhere to a dress code that causes chronic pain and makes the job physically unbearable for many.
It's a fundamental disconnect between stated economic necessity and deeply ingrained patriarchal tradition.
It's national self-sabotage. It's like inviting someone to run a marathon to save your city's reputation, but then telling them they have to do it wearing concrete diving flippers because it's tradition.
And that sabotage, it has a real cost. This isn't just a philosophical debate about culture. It's economic. It's about dollars and yen.
This is where we have to pivot to the hard data. Because these debates so often get stuck in the murky waters of culture and tradition. But if we look at the pure economics of pain, the argument for mandatory high heels just completely collapses.
I was reading this anonymous account from a human resources manager, an HR manager in a major Osaka finance firm. And it offered this chillingly clinical look at the issue from inside the machine.
Right.
And he wasn't a villain in the story. He wasn't some, mustache-twirling patriarch. He was a man obsessed with professional aesthetics. He genuinely believed that the uniform, the crisp suits for men, the heels and skirts for women was the product they were selling to clients before a single word was spoken.
The visual brand identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The problem was the data started telling a different story. His own internal data. He noticed a pattern. Young, talented, highly trained women were leaving the front-end client-facing service roles after only 18 months, 2 years.
That's a huge churn rate.
Huge. And when he looked closer, he dug into the exit interviews. They weren't saying things like, I got a better offer or I'm changing careers. The recurring themes were chronic back pain, foot problems, and what one called the exhaustion of the performative.
The exhaustion of the performative. It perfectly captures that the job isn't just the work. The job is the performance of a specific gender role while doing the work.
And that performance is expensive for the company. This HR manager calculated that the firm was losing millions of yen in recruitment and training costs every year just to maintain a specific visual silhouette on the lobby floor. The supposed value of the aesthetic was actually a massive financial liability.
So the thing they thought was their brand asset was actually killing their bottom line.
And also, a bit heartbreaking to see how this idea of professionalism is used as a shield for gross inefficiency. When we talk about the economic impact, we often forget that a company's look can be the very thing destroying its productivity.
It's a cautionary tale for any industry that values the packaging more than the person inside.
Definitely.
And we need to get specific about the damage, because the term discomfort is too soft. We are not just talking about, my feet hurt a little bit at the end of the day. Medical sources we have are, frankly, gruesome.
We mentioned hallux valgus earlier.
Bunions. But bunion is a word that sounds almost cute, like something your grandmother gets. Hallux valgus is a progressive skeletal deformity.
Explain the mechanics of it.
The narrow, pointed toe box of a typical high heel crushes your toes together. At the same time, the steep incline of the heel forces all your body weight down onto that compressed area. The joint of the big toe, under this immense and unnatural pressure, literally buckles outward. The bone structure changes.
And that's not something you can fix with an ice pack.
No. That often requires invasive surgery. We're talking about orthopedic surgeons shaving down the bone, sometimes inserting pins to realign the toe. It's serious.
Yeah, that's just one condition.
We also have extensive reports of the shortening of the Achilles tendon. This is a really insidious one. If you wear high heels constantly, day after day, your calf muscle and Achilles tendon adapt to that shortened, contracted position.
So the body thinks that's the new normal.
Exactly. Then when you take the shoes off at night and try to walk flat-footed, the tendon is too tight. It can't stretch to its natural length. It pulls on the heel bone, causing chronic inflammation, a condition called Achilles tendonitis.
So your body is literally reshaping itself, deforming itself to fit the corporate mold.
The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu has this concept of habitus, the idea that culture is ingested and becomes part of the body, our posture, our gestures. This is a literal, brutal example of that. The corporate culture is rewriting the anatomy of the female worker.
And yet, companies defend it. And it's not just heels. You brought up the glasses ban in our prep. This feels like it comes from the exact same place.
It's the twin sister of the heel mandate. It's the same logic applied to a different part of the body. Around the same time #Q2 was peaking, this story broke that major Japanese retail chains, department stores, and even some airlines were banning their female staff from wearing glasses.
But not the men. The men could wear glasses.
Of course not the men. Men in glasses look intellectual, serious. For women, the reasoning from these companies was that glasses gave a cold impression to customers.
A cold impression?
Or, and this is my absolute favorite, it's just so absurd, some companies argued that the glasses hid their makeup.
Wait, that hid their makeup. So the list of priorities for the company is clearly, number one, full visibility of the employee's makeup. Number two, somewhere far down the list is the employee's actual ability to see the customer they are serving.
It lays the logic bare, doesn't it? It reinforces this idea that the female employee is, first and foremost, a decoration. She is part of the store's ambiance. She's living furniture.
And if the furniture looks cold, you change it. The fact that the furniture is a human being who needs corrective lenses to process a credit card transaction or read a label is completely secondary.
It is dehumanizing in the most politely corporate way imaginable. We value your contribution to our team, but please don't let your debilitating myopia distract from your expertly applied eyeliner.
It's just wild. But some companies are starting to wake up to this. There have been victories. The Japan Airlines case, JAL, that's the gold standard here.
This was a huge win, a massive win for the movement. Well, JAL used to be the bastion of these conservative dress codes. The image of the JAL Sky Lady in her skirt and heels was iconic. It was part of their brand for decades.
A symbol of Japanese service.
Right. But after #Q2 gained so much traction and put this issue in the national spotlight, they did a complete 180. They scrapped the mandatory heel requirement for their female cabin crew.
Huge.
They also scrapped the mandatory skirts. They introduced trousers as a standard option and approved a range of flat shoes, including loafers, for everyone.
And that single act proves the government's social norms argument is a complete lie.
So,
because JAL didn't collapse. Their stock price didn't tank. Their planes didn't start falling out of the sky because the flight attendants were wearing comfortable loafers. Business continued.
If anything, safety and service likely improved. You want your flight attendant to be stable and quick on their feet during turbulence, not teetering on stilettos while trying to secure an overhead bin.
JAL is still an outlier. The resistance is still incredibly strong in other sectors. You mentioned hotels, traditional banks, high-end retail. They are digging in their heels, literally.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
What is it about those sectors specifically where the resistance is so deep?
I think it comes down to the silent majority problem. We have surveys that were taken during the height of the hashtag #Kutu movement. They showed that over 60% of working women in Japan felt that they were being forced to wear high heels or that they wanted the rules changed.
60%?
Yeah.
That's a landslide in any democracy. That's a clear mandate for change.
But in a rigid corporate hierarchy, it doesn't matter if you are the majority, if you are a silent majority. The cultural pressure to conform, to not be the one who causes trouble, the pressure to avoid meiwaku is overwhelming.
So individual complaints just get crushed.
They get suppressed or ignored. The system is designed to handle individual dissent. What it wasn't designed to handle was a collective roar, a digital roar, and that's what made this different.
And that leads us directly to the technology. Because this revolution, it didn't happen in the union hall or the employee break room. It happened on Twitter.
This is the third piece. This is the digital rebellion.
There's this powerful narrative I encountered online about a digital rebellion led by a new generation of workers who decided they were finished with gammon. The cultural virtue of enduring the unbearable. I imagine a young woman in a cramped apartment in Tokyo or maybe Seoul staring at her phone late at night. And she's scrolling and she's realizing that her blisters are the exact same shape as the blisters of a woman 500 miles away whom she's never met.
A digital connection through shared pain.
Yes. And the #Kutu hashtag wasn't just a trend, it was a rupture in that tradition of silence. For the first time, the shame of complaining, which is so deeply ingrained, was replaced by the power of the viral thread. They used the tools of global fourth-wave feminism to broadcast their physical discomfort. They were effectively telling the old guard, the men in those boardrooms and in the diet, we will no longer suffer in private to make you comfortable in public.
Sure.
They completely rejected the idea that endurance is a feminine virtue. And I look at these digital movements and I'm moved by the bravery it takes to be loud in a culture that rewards you, systemically, for being quiet.
It's a huge risk.
And while some critics might see this as confrontational or un-Japanese, I see it as a necessary evolution. They aren't trying to destroy their culture. They are demanding a version of it that doesn't require them to bleed for a paycheck. It's a fundamental shift from endurance to expression. And honestly, it's about time.
That shift you identified from endurance to expression, that is the core of this whole thing. And to understand how it happened so fast, we have to talk about the linguistic brilliance of the hashtag itself. It's not just a copy-paste of Western activism. It wasn't just taking #MeToo and translating it.
No, it's a localized masterpiece of wordplay. #Kutu.
It's a triple entendre, a perfect pun. First, you have the Japanese word kutsu.
Which means shoes.
Right. Then you have a very similar sounding word, kutsu.
Which means pain.
And then, of course, you have the phonetic link to the global #MeToo movement, which gives it that instant international recognition.
So in one single hashtag, you have shoes, pain, and Me Too. It brilliantly links a specific physical object of pain to the broader global struggle against gender-based violence and harassment.
It signals to everyone, this isn't just about fashion or footwear. This is about power. This is about systemic harm.
And by using the Japanese language so cleverly, it allowed them to signal a very specific Japanese grievance while simultaneously tapping into that global feminist energy.
And crucially, it allowed them to bypass the traditional media gatekeepers.
Which is so important in a place like Japan, where the traditional media, the big newspapers, the TV networks, is often incredibly conservative and male-dominated.
They weren't going to cover the story proactively. They weren't going to go looking for it. The hashtag made it so big, so viral, that it became impossible for them to ignore.
So Twitter allowed women to connect directly with each other, to build a movement from the ground up without asking for permission.
Exactly. It allowed them to finally break the culture of gamen. We've mentioned that word gamen a few times. It's usually translated as endurance or perseverance.
And it's almost always framed as a compliment, a virtue. You have so much gammon.
Yes. In the context of a natural disaster like an earthquake or a personal tragedy, it is a virtue. It's about stoicism and resilience. But in a labor context, it has been twisted into a tool of suppression.
Endure the 60-hour work week. Endure the yelling from your boss.
Endure the groping on the train. Endure the shoes. It's framed as a moral obligation to the group. If you complain, you are selfish. You lack gammon.
And #Kutu completely flipped that on its head. It said, my suffering for the group is not a virtue if it is causing me permanent physical injury. That's not harmony, that's abuse.
This connects directly to the constructive resistance theory we saw in those academic papers we pulled.
Yes.
Constructive resistance isn't just about tearing things down. It's not just about saying no. It's about building a new alternative. It's about proposing a better way.
So hashtag Kutu wasn't just anti-heels.
It was pro-choice in footwear. It was pro-health for workers. It was pro-diversity in what a professional woman can look like. It was offering a new constructive vision of a modern workplace.
And Yumi Ishikawa herself, she became a new kind of resistance figure. And this is where the story gets really ugly for her, personally.
Ishikawa didn't fit the traditional acceptable mold of a female activist in Japan.
What is that mold?
Often the socially acceptable trope for a female activist is the mother figure, the concerned mom. Think about the anti-nuclear activists after Fukushima. Many were mothers, framed as protecting their children from radiation, or women protesting food additives. It's a maternal, nurturing form of resistance. It's seen as selfless and non-threatening.
Ishikawa was not playing the mom card.
No, she was a single woman. She was a former pinup model. She had done gravure modeling. She was an actress. She was a funeral worker. She was resisting as an individual woman, demanding rights for her own body, not for the sake of her children. And the conservative establishment hated that.
This is where the flaming started.
The Joe.
Vicious online backlash. People, mostly anonymous men, dug up her past modeling photos to try and discredit her. They posted them everywhere. They attacked her character relentlessly. The twisted logic was, you showed your body for money in the past, so you have no right to complain about what you're forced to wear on your feet now. You forfeited your right to bodily autonomy.
Which is a disgusting classic logical fallacy, but it illustrates the incredibly high personal cost of speaking out in a conformist society. It was a concerted effort to shame her back into silence.
But she didn't back down. She stood her ground. And it's important to remember, she wasn't entirely alone in a global sense. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. We were seeing similar movements bubble up elsewhere.
Right, the Escape the Corset movement in South Korea was happening around the same time. Women publicly destroying their expensive makeup and cutting their hair short to protest impossible beauty standards. There was a protest at the consulting firm PwC in the UK, where a receptionist was sent home without pay for refusing to wear 2 to 4 inch heels. That became a huge national story.
And you even had celebrities like Julia Roberts walking the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival, completely barefoot, in protest of their strict high-heel dress code.
It shows that this fourth wave of feminism is deeply interconnected digitally. Japanese women weren't isolated anymore. They were seeing these global signals on their phones and realizing, wait a minute, we can do this too. We're part of something bigger.
And the digital literacy, the sophistication of these protests just kept evolving.
Absolutely. We saw it go from hashtag #MeToo, which was a global import, to the localized brilliance of hashtag Kutu, and then to hashtag #WithYou.
That was for the flower demos.
The flower demos against Japan's appallingly low conviction rates for sexual assault. And then you even had funnier, but still pointed, hashtags like hashtag Kimo, when Kim Kardashian tried to trademark the word kimono for her shapewear line.
It shows a growing fluency, a growing confidence in using these digital tools for social and political protest in Japan.
A huge leap in just a few years.
So let's bring this all back together. We started this whole deep dive with that analyst's idea that hashtag Kutu was a soft whisper.
And I think we have comprehensively proven it was anything but. There was nothing soft or whispery about it.
It was a labor dispute fought with petitions and parliamentary procedure. It was a political confrontation with a minister publicly dismissing the health of thousands of his citizens.
It was a medical crisis, documented in photos of blood and bone deformities. And it was a digital war, complete with online mobs and a courageous leader who refused to be silenced.
It didn't change the law overnight. The Equal Employment Opportunity Law is still weak. Minister Nomoto didn't get fired.
No, the bureaucratic wall held for the most part.
But it forced a national conversation that corporations like Japan Airlines could no longer ignore. It dragged the unseen, unspoken pain of millions of women out of the silent office and into the bright, unavoidable light of the public square.
And it proved, I think, once and for all, that business etiquette and social norms are not valid excuses for causing orthopedic injury. That is a massive cultural shift, even if the law hasn't caught up yet.
Absolutely. It forced the system to, at the very least, acknowledge that the human bodies inside the uniforms matter more than the aesthetic of the uniforms themselves.
A hard-won victory.
So, as we close this out, think about this. We spent this time talking about shoes, which can seem trivial, but if you look around your own workplace, your own life, How many other social norms or professional standards do we just accept as unchangeable traditions? When in reality, they're just structural inconveniences, big and small, that rely on our collective silence to survive.
Yeah.
The hashtag #Kutu movement proved that the way things are is only the way things are because not enough people have made enough noise to change them.
Yet.